TV, New York. Yes, it's this Russian thing going on because of the hat. You know, I wear the hat, and it makes me want to speak with a Russian accent. I don't know why. Okay, I'll try to be serious and probably be falling into Russian accent from time to time, but I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. And I'm doing a follow-up show tonight, a little bit better planned out, with my photography and a couple of Photoshop illustrations, and about what I have been studying in the sky since 2005, mostly using a 1970s era Konica 35 millimeter camera with a 400 power zoom lens that I put a doubling lens on, so it became an 800 power zoom lens. And after about 3 or 4, maybe even as many as 5 years of spending hundreds, perhaps thousands of hours looking at the sky and photographing things, my camera was found missing one day from my car, and I've replaced it since with a digital camera, which just doesn't have these filters, it doesn't have the zoom, it doesn't have the kind of warmth and quality that the real deal 35 millimeter film does. I'm going to cover this show kind of like a slideshow. So we'll be moving through our slides, and I'll speak to each one. And before I get going, I'd like to thank Paula Gloria Barton for teching for me and making this show possible, because I can't operate the equipment back there behind the desk and be in front of the green screen. Clearly, I need help. So thank you, Paula. And don't be bashful if you want to ask questions or jump in. And also, for those of you who are watching live tonight, today is Wednesday, March 20. Is today the 23rd or the 22nd? 23rd. Happy spring, happy equinox. And moving right along, I want to open up the discussion tonight. Oh, right. What I was saying is you can call in tonight at this time, and the phone number is 679-7777, 845-679-7777. You can ask questions or poke fun at my Russian accent. I don't mind, and we'll get right to it. I have a couple of categories here: clouds and chemtrails and objects in the sky and stuff like that. And we're opening with this very, very important and illustrative cloud picture here, and that's a cirrus cloud. I took that photo in probably 2007, 2008, somewhere in there, coming back from Massachusetts, and this cloud was over the region of Boston, and I took it from the car on the Mass Turnpike. And what's significant about this is what you're seeing there is you're seeing a natural cirrus cloud that is being attacked by chemtrailing plane or several planes. Because if you see in the lower part of your screen, you'll see old chemtrails that are wisping away, and you'll see newer ones that are still have some definition there and the lower quarter of the screen. But more towards the upper left of the image there, you see a brand spanky new chemtrail, almost looking like a toothpick in shape and proportion. And if you can look closely at your TV, you'll even see the airplane, which is just looks like a black speck in the photograph. If I were to blow it up, you can actually see, or enlarge the image there, you can actually see the plane in question. But why I say this is a very important picture, besides the fact that you can see old chemtrails spreading out at the bottom of the cirrus cloud. Now, I call it a cirrus cloud because it is a wispy-looking cloud. We used to call them, when we were kids, mare's tails. And when you had mare's tails in the sky, we would say you had 36 hours till rain. So that's like in a day and a half you were going to get rain when you would see these cirrus clouds. And you can't go by that anymore, because the cirrus clouds are being manipulated and inoculated with metal particulates in a, I don't want to say gaseous form, but an atomized form, which is almost gaseous. It's a very, very fine particulate of aluminum oxides, barium oxides. There's a variety of metals that are used in other, as well as polymers called aerogels, which help suspend these particulates in the atmosphere longer. The reason this is very illustrative is that in my many years of research into clouds, clouds are like the living parts of superorganisms. It's like another order of life. You know, all you guys out there, do you know your orders of life or your kingdoms? You have the plant kingdom. You have the animal kingdom. You have the fungi. Okay, and then those are then broken into orders of life, where you have amongst say the animal kingdom, reptiles, birds, mammals, insects, bacteria, plants, and in a fish. That's another order of life. The sky, we usually attribute birds to the sky as the living creatures of the sky, birds and insects. And the research I stumbled into, it's not my own, it's other people like Wilhelm Reich and Nikola Tesla, and amongst others, Trevor Constable. I really recommend y'all look these guys up and read about them. They're fascinating and amazing scientists of our age. Clouds are very much the living, visible living organs of a supra creature, a sky critter, is what Trevor Constable called them. And Trevor Constable did his research in the 1940s and 50s using the Air Force latest technology, because it was the Air Force that conscripted all three of these gentlemen, actually. Tesla, Reich, and Constable were conscripted by the Air Force to study the atmosphere, because it is the interest of the Air Force to control everything in it, including the atmosphere itself. And what Trevor Constable found out is that there are heat signatures in the atmosphere that are huge. And he called them sky critters. They very frequently had a geometry about them. And now there we go. That's a lovely chemtrail there. And it's a great photograph to illustrate that it is not a contrail. Contrails don't wiggle and spread out like that. And but moving back to our living sky, see, this is a dead object in the sky. This is not a living cloud.
Is it a critter?
Yeah.
No.
No, this is a weapon, and it's probably all right. Now that is where we're getting into some nice business there. You can see the wispiness of a cirrus cloud, which is a living thing, and then you see the on again, off again squirt of chemtrail into specifically that little cloud. Well, that little cloud is actually part of a much bigger organism, but these Air Force guys don't think that big. They're really concentrating on controlling the sky and everything that is in it. Okay. Now here's a really great image that I was scanning the chemtrails as they were spreading out, and in and amongst the chemtrails and artificial clouds that were formed by them, I picked up this object that at first I thought was a plane, but the more I examined it in my photography and I blew it up and made a more detailed or enlargement of that image, it became very evident to me that it is not an airplane or conventional aircraft that we are used to with wings and engines. This one seems to have a disc-like quality about it. It wobbled very quickly in the frame, since this was again, this is a mechanical photograph with real 35 millimeter film. So the f-stop, or the shutter speed, will catch a very quick movement. So on the right of this object, you'll see a smudge of brightness. That's the reflection of the sun, in my estimation, as the object wiggled a little bit, because these gravity drive craft do not always sit still in the sky. They frequently bump and they move around. They are flying with unconventional methods. I call them gravity drive, for lack of a better word. And they create a distortion field under the craft or around the craft, and they sort of surf the geomagnetism and gravity fields of whatever planet they're around when they're in an atmosphere. So as they do that, they're not using the energy that their battery or their reactor core generates. So they have to bump around. They have to discharge that energy. So very frequently you will see them do a quick movement and then come back to where they were, while they're sort of surfing the waves of the gravity of the planet. So that's one of the indications of a gravity drive craft. Okay, and some of those indications are in that photo. As we now that's our Cirrus cloud again being attacked with what I could tell was a conventional craft. And
you want to talk more about that?
no, we can move on to the next frame. It's helpful for me when we have these different images up to keep the flow of the conversation. But leading to the study of the atmosphere that Trevor Constable and Nikola Tesla and Wilhelm Reich engaged in for the Air Force, they discovered that the sky is a living thing, and it is much an extension of the ocean. And in the ocean, it is populated with creatures. Some of them are like jellyfish. Well, much as the sky. The sky is populated with another order of life that Trevor Constable called sky critters, which apparently reproduce. They live for millions of years, and they're highly intelligent. And that's another thing that comes into question, is that I've had experience with cirrus clouds occurring at low altitude, which they're not supposed to do. And there's even a NASA article, you can look it up, cirrus clouds below 10,000 feet, a new phenomena found after, say, 2006. Now, if we want to fade back to that image, I'd like to talk about that image.
Is that a cirrus?
Now, those are cirrus clouds, and that's a very curious craft that's in it. If I were to enlarge that object, which, for the purpose of this show, we can't really do effectively. So it's a tube. It's not really an airplane.
But in editing, I can.
And yeah. And
you want to look at it?
Sure. Let's put it back up. And it's seemingly observing the cirrus clouds around it. This was probably taken around 2006, 2007, over the skies over Sharon, Connecticut, Millerton, New York, and some of these in later years of my work over Woodstock, New York as well. And the nature of this cloud formation is not natural. And in here, over Ulster County and the Northeast in general, very, very few clouds are natural now. Almost all of them are byproducts of chemtrailing the cirrus clouds. The cirrus clouds then absorb the chemtrails and process it while they go through a metamorphosis of sorts. And the clouds become somewhat cumulus-like, but they're very flat and two-dimensional. They're not puffy and healthy-looking cumulus clouds. And that's one of the aspects of this kind of thing. Now, this was taken over Phoenicia, going towards the Phoenicia Diner a couple summers ago, and that's with my digital camera. I can't, like I said, the digital camera only has so much zoom. It doesn't have lenses that I can affix to it and increase that zoom power. But I call this X marks the spot. For those of you that really are convinced that chemtrails don't exist, I took that photo specifically to show that not only are they, putting lots of stuff in the atmosphere, they're kind of mocking us too, but they also do it to mark a portion of the sky, I believe, so that they can continue to bombard that area for whatever sky critter might be present that the naked eye can't see. Now I would be thrilled if I had the cash to go out and buy an infrared camera and take sky photos with infrared to see if I could capture some of those heat signatures and images that Trevor Constable did. And if you look at,
if anyone wants to call in 679-7777, if you have an infrared camera,
sure,
679-7777.
Or any interest in sharing some of the chemtrail events you may have been witness to, because there are a number of people here in the Hudson Valley. In fact, there's a Facebook page which I find so interesting that I have as a favorite, and Facebook basically doesn't post anything that they put up on my page, even though I subscribe to their website. But yeah, Hudson Valley chemtrails is something to look into if you want to get a lot of information about local chemtrail activity. Now this is another shot, and again, it's probably very curious exactly what is making that chemtrail. It could be a plane, it could be no plane, or it could be a plane that's got a hologram of something else over it, or something else that has a hologram of a plane over it. But as you notice, it's going into, again, that wispy kind of cloud structure, a cirrus cloud. And you can tell by the nature of the cloud formation immediately in front of that chemtrail and below it is sort of a mottled look. It's kind of mottled and fluffy-ish looking, and that is an older chemtrail, and you can see that there's a very straight line going across the bottom of that sort of hazy looking cloud, because that's an older chemtrail that has spread out, and it spreads out in the direction, in the general direction of the wind at whatever altitude it is at. Atmospheric winds occur in all kinds of directions. So you could be having an east wind on the surface, and you could be having a west wind at 30,000 feet, or 20,000 feet. The atmosphere is got some complex stuff going on. And that's all right. This is another important image, because what you're seeing here is that a contrail doesn't turn on and off, and a contrail doesn't leave a residue for a trail. If you look carefully at this image, you'll see that this.
Explain contrail.
Yes, I will. All right. A contrail is a condensation trail from an airplane. Okay, usually a jet. It could be a turbojet. That's a jet engine that has a propeller on it as well. And what happens is that you are burning kerosene, jet fuel, and it gets compressed once it's atomized and squirted with just like a fuel injector in your car. There's fuel injectors in jet engines in the compression, where the turbines create a compression area, and that compression is then ignited with a spark, and the fuel is burned, and as it's exiting the jet engine, it's very explosive, and it creates a whole lot of thrust. And that's the idea of a jet engine. And that thrust pushes the craft forward. Well, the exhaust is the thrust, is a byproduct of the thrust, is the exhaust, and that exhaust creates that trail behind the plane. At usually 20, 30,000 feet is when those contrails occur, because it is cold enough at that altitude to make the water vapor in the exhaust, because that's what happens to the fuel. And this is all engines that burn hydrocarbons, is you have water as a byproduct in most. I've seen as much as 90% of every gallon of liquid hydrocarbon fuel burned is water. I've seen other formulas that say 60%. So I'm going to split the difference. Somewhere between 60 and 90% of every gallon of gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, water is coming out the tailpipe or the jet exhaust. And that freezes as ice crystals, and then it sublimates. So a contrail sublimates after about a mile, 2 miles behind the craft. It disappears, goes away. To look at it on the ground, if you put your hand up and you measure with thumb to pinky like that in the sky, and you're looking up with your like that, that'll give you like the distance of the contrail from the plane. And so that is like a rough way to measure, well, it's maybe 1 mile long or a half mile long or 2 miles long, depending on the altitude and various other ways of measuring it. But just from the ground observation without tools, you can use your body, measure it with your thumb and your pinky like that, kind of like that.
So as long as the craft is moving and the engines are on, there's going to be a contrail.
This is
you
correct.
Can't get around it.
You can't get around it, and it's altitude related. It's above 10,000, 15,000 feet. That's when it's cold enough for this contrail phenomena to really manifest. And then, like I said, a normal contrail sublimates. Sublimation is when you go from one state of water, the solid state, which is ice, to the gaseous state, which is vapor, without passing through the liquid state, which is water. See, because usually water goes in the reverse order. Starts out as a gas in the atmosphere. It collects onto a cold object called a nucleating particulate, and then then it gets heavy as a water droplet, and then it becomes a water drop, and then it is heavy enough to fall as rain. That's the natural thing. And if it is cold enough, it will fall as sleet or snow. Contrails are very different than chemtrails. The chemtrail doesn't require altitude to determine whether it's going to be visible or not. It is visible when they turn the nozzle on and spray the stuff out. That's when it's visible. And here you can see it's at a place in the atmosphere where there's enough of a gentle breeze, but not very much, that the chemtrail is lingering, and it's showing its chemistry, in a sense, by holding together and making these wiggles in the sky. All right? A contrail won't do that. A contrail is straight, and it dissipates. It doesn't hang out. Within 2 or 3 minutes, it's gone. Chemtrails, on the other hand, will hang out all day.
What about turning them on and off?
You would be a contrail being turned on and off means turning on and off the jet engine,
Right? No, I mean
which is not recommended.
No, I mean the chemtrail. Like
Well-
this one, could it be turned on and off?
Well,
Or no?
yeah, it can be. I think it's sort of indicating. I almost think like it's like running out of juice, so it's like sputtering out as they're emptying their chemtrail tank.
Yeah.
If you want, roll along to another image, let's see what we got.
Okay.
All right, now this is a chemtrail cloud sky. That sky is not a natural sky. It's been chemtrailed heavily, and again, it's sort of that steely, metallic gray, not very interesting, very two-dimensional looking.
Not a happy sky.
It's not a happy sky, and you can see it's very hazy in the mountain below it. So that's another. All right, here we're getting into a little fun. This our object has a companion with it, and I'm not sure if that is an artifact of dust or dirt on the film, or in the processing of the film to print. But there it is, and this little weird thing on the left there occurs in quite a bit of my old photography. But what we're looking at here now, you could say that I've got a shaky hand, except the definition of the trail itself. There's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5, maybe even 6 streamers of chemtrail coming off of. It's not an airplane, folks. I don't know what it is, but if it was a shaky hand, now mind you, this is an enlargement. This is an extreme enlargement. So to have that much definition and that much of an enlargement, you would clearly see smudging of a shaky hand. Okay, you won't have such clarity, and this is such a significant photograph because the one streamer that's to the left really separated from the other streamers. So you sort of kind of deviates away, so you can see a real good definition that this object is leaving behind very separate streamers. Now, what is that object? It could be a Russian. I don't know. I have no idea what that object is, and that's the whole point of this discussion. Let's keep going. All right. This looks like an ordinary airplane. This is scanned from a photograph, and the smudging that you see is probably scratching and stuff from the handling of that photograph when I was because it was very new, and I got so excited I put it into my scanner so I could enlarge it. This jet, if you want to call it that, was probably 15 or 20 feet long. You could not fit a human being in it. It's a drone. But the curious thing about it is it was flying over the town of Millerton at just above treetop level, not far from me. I would say within 2,000 feet or 3,000 feet, and it was about 500 feet high or less, and I could hear it, and it was just hissing. It was going, and it was making the most curious movement because it was not flying conventionally. I'm going to use my hand. That's not a duck. All right? And it would go like this, stop. It would turn 90 degrees, go like this, stop, turn 90 degrees, do that. And then it was working a grid pattern, okay, over the neighborhood, and it was spraying a clear substance. All right? Do you want to go back to that? Look at that. All right, now, the other curious thing about many of these weird objects, again, I was pretty close to this, and it looks exactly like a normal jet. The only thing is that I don't know of any conventional jet with what looks like an engine. See that tube-like engine-looking thing behind the wings and in the tail section.
A backpack.
Okay. Now, there is a 727 which has a gang of 3 engines on the tail section. And it's one of the best. If you can get to fly on a 727, that is one of the best engineered commercial jet airliners ever. It's not a very big plane. But anyway, that's the normal configuration. I don't know of any, and if there's any airplane experts out there, go ahead, call in and correct me if I'm wrong. One engine on the tail section I've never seen, unless there was 2 engines on the wings. I've seen that configuration. I've seen 1 engine in the tail section with 2 engines on the wings. There are no other engines which appear to be engines. I personally think that's just more stuff to spray around. But the thing is that there's also, I've worked over this photograph many times, there's no windows. There's no windows. And it's small. I was close to the object. And there's that little orb dot-like thing right under the craft, right under the nose section. And this, I think, is
a cloaking thing?
Is very likely a hologram generator, because I don't think there's an airplane there at all. I think it's just a mock-up that they give us. And this photograph has been taken up by a lot of websites. It's gone around the world. Ken Adachi's site, educateyourself.org,
Your photograph went all over the world?
Yes, this one has.
Wow.
Through the internet, yeah, through since 2007 or 2006 even. Because when Ken Adachi got a hold of this photo, he was like, "How did you get so close to this thing?" And I said, "Well, I didn't have to. It was close to me. It was right over our town. It was very close to the ground. It was only about 1,000, 2,000 feet away from me at about 500 feet up. And this was really a remarkable capture. And he was very curious about the orb, the little pin spot of light there, that little ball of light underneath the craft as well. And he did some research with it on his website. Let's see what we got coming up. Let's go to the next one. Now this is a great photograph. This is over Falls Village, Connecticut. This is going back to 2006, 2007. That is a classic chemtrail sky, and for those of you who like to look at the sky over the Ashokan Reservoir, you will see this an awful lot because they target our reservoir. And I think that they're inoculating the water with aluminum. And I want to talk about why aluminum oxide in the atmosphere is disastrous for our health. Because aluminum oxide as a nanoparticle gets into our nose, throat from breathing, okay? And once it gets up into the nose and gets into the sinuses, aluminum oxide specifically is very aggressive. It is like a weapon. It goes right through the blood-brain barrier and goes right into your brain, right into these areas that are concerned with memory. Now, I took care of an elderly gentleman for a short time in the early 1980s. And he had Alzheimer's. It killed him eventually. And what we discovered in all that research is that every brain biopsy of an Alzheimer-related death had high or elevated levels of aluminum. And they are spraying this stuff in our sky almost every day. Now, what's also important about this, you can see this, you can see the older chemtrails spreading out, you can see the new ones that have just been laid out, and then you can see the general haze and what I call schmutz in the sky that has almost like a test pattern in it, a herringbone pattern, and it's very subtle. It's in the quadrant, in the upper left quadrant of this image on screen here. You can see a very subtle, very regular way herringbone patterning to the haze. Can you see that, Paula? Yeah. All right, comes up on screen. Great. All right, that is by some reckonings, and I agree with this reckoning, caused by HAARP. HAARP is high altitude auroral research program or project, and this is a frequency directed energy beam weapon, and it attacks the ionized sky. Ionized, well, you have the ionosphere, but you also have in this case the lower portions below the ionosphere is the stratosphere, which is where much of this activity takes place. And these radio frequencies or directed energy frequencies organize the sky in this herringbone pattern, and they create pressure systems artificially by heating these metal elements in the clouds. And then that will in turn do a variety of things, perhaps move the cloud or create a high pressure system and create a lack of rain, or you have a thought there?
Yeah, it reminds me of putting sand on a table, and then you put frequencies and vibrations, and as the table shakes from the frequencies, it makes different patterns in the sand.
That's exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's the same principle. It's very much the same principle. If we want to move on, all right. This was in the same backyard in Falls Village, and it is an enlargement. I should have perhaps put a context figure, a picture, but this was right in the backyard, and directly below that image is lawn, a big lawn, about 1.5 acres of lawn. So it's just grass, and then in the distance trees. And what's interesting about this is I just had a funny feeling and turned and took a picture without seeing anything. Something just said, take a picture. And I took a couple of pictures, and this is one of the images that came up. There is nothing else there. It is just these two white squiggly lines, or like two little noodle-like lines. So there was something in the backyard, and the altitude, I would say, was 30 feet.
Wow.
It was very close to the ground. 30 feet. And the object was probably 100 feet away from me, or 200 feet away from me. So that's not even a zoom. I was just taking a local picture, and then, but for the purpose of this image, I enlarged it enough to get the ground and the trees in the background and stuff out of the way, just because I wanted to exercise some contrast and is brightness and contrast. Imaging or adjustments can bring out more detail sometimes. But this is actually unfiltered, unmanipulated. This is the raw image, just as it came out on my 35 millimeter film. Okay, we saw that one. We can move along. All right, well, I guess we're going in the other direction.
Okay. I think I need a new chapter, a new folder.
All right. The sky is a living thing, and cirrus clouds are very important because they are intelligent creatures that work to regulate our weather. And people say, oh, you can't control the weather. Well, the research I stumbled into, and again, some of it's mine, but most of it isn't, that's not the case. And these cell towers going up are going to be a part of this grand design weaponizing of the atmosphere. Now, there are treaties that exist that Russia, China, I guess the G8, the big ones, signed treaties that geoengineering and weaponizing of the sky would not be engaged in. So much for that treaty. And let's see if we got. Okay, we've been there. Let's go. Oh, okay, all right. Now this guy is much like that other plane. Now I've had people say to me, "Well, that's a Warthog. That's an A-10." Well, I know what an A-10 is, and I know how big they are. They're probably 50, 60 feet long, and they make a real good roar. This, if you want to call it an airplane, if you will, was again very close to me. It went right over my head, and it was maybe 15 feet, 10, 15, 12 feet long. You could not put a pilot in there. You cannot put a pilot in that little thing. It, again, like the other one, the other craft, just made a hiss. That's the sound it made.
Does that mean it was close to you?
It was very close to me. It was as close to me as though I had it on a kite string. And fortunately, I was out taking pictures, so I had my camera around my neck. I didn't have a real good opportunity to focus in on it because it was very quietly going right along at I would say it was going 20 miles an hour. All right, so something that's close to you going 20 miles an hour, it's like this, I had to snap it on the move, so it wouldn't be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to, when you do sky pictures of airplanes like this, if you want a stable image, especially, good, now you have me like this, I can show you peeps. This is what I had to do. I would have to get it in the frame and then track at the speed it's going and then snap, snap, snap. And if I got 3 or 4 or 5 snaps, 1 or 2, and as I got better, 3, would be usable photographs. They would be good. They'd really capture a clean image. So I only had 2 opportunities with that one, and those are the images that came out. They are not perfect. They are not absolutely wonderful, but they show enough detail to give us an indication that it's not a normal airplane. If you want to go back to that image, please.
Yeah.
And I'll explain. The upper image, let's start there first. First of all, let's look at the tail section. What the heck is going on there? All right, now they look like panels, okay? So there are like these panels this is not a conventional tail section, and those are not engines because it didn't have engines. Okay, it had these bulky packs on them.
It's like cancers.
Yeah, and if you look at the midsection between the flaps, which are very evident in the lower part there, you can see these flaps, all right, that are coming off of, and if you go back to the upper section, that's not a conventional engine of any kind. It's kind of a different kind of a structure.
It's like a balloon airplane that a clown would twist for you.
No, this was a metallic craft, and the wings weren't very swept, because I think the wings are part of the delivery system, because there seems to be holes underneath it. But once again, tracking underneath this plane, you can see in the upper photograph yet another object that was not visible when I took the picture, but it came out on the picture. And that's why I love this old Konica camera, because I always had a filter on it. I didn't know what the filter did. I'm not a photographer. I had to learn on the hoof, right? And so I would change these little filters, which would look very clear looking, and some of them had a slight amber cast, but very, very light, not much. But most of them were clear, and I think they're like polarizing or depolarizing, polarizing or depolarizing filters that gave, in some instances, a great deal of clarity, and in other instances would give details that the naked eye can't see. And this again, this was in my other one. I love this image. First of all, it was an intuitive shot. I was driving around the north side of Mudge Pond, and very, very high up, way high up over where my house was on the south side of Mudge Pond, the sky was clear, but there were these big cumulus clouds, nice thunderheads, right? But in the clear spot, way up, I mean, we're talking 40,000 feet or more, I saw a little glint. And I always had the camera next to me, and I always had it focused for way high, just because it's easier to go from way out to in than from in to way out. For me anyway, it was just that way. So I grabbed the camera and I put it in that general direction. I stopped the car, of course, and I snapped away. And in snapping, I could see these little glints. Bang, 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 bang. I think I took 5 or 6. Let's go back to the picture. And in that collection, one I got. And that's it. Very high up. I only had a fraction of a second to get it. I took 5 or 6 shots, just hoping I'd catch whatever it was that was glinting up there. And when I got it home, and I got the film developed, and then I got the prints home, and I put the prints in my scanner. I had quite a process. I scanned the print, so sometimes you can actually see the grain of the print. But this one had enough detail that as I enlarged it and enlarged it and enlarged it, by God, you can see a disk craft with a coronal discharge. And that's what a scientist said that was under it. I showed this photograph. This photograph went around the world too, back in 2007. Yes, that's like an electric field discharge. And then, do you see the craft? And I went over this in the last video on this subject last week. That craft is not symmetrical. It's not symmetrical. They're not going to be symmetrical. Okay, here we are. It's not going to be symmetrical if it's a real UFO because they bend light. They bend light with their gravity drive systems. All right? Unconventional aircraft. They do not use propulsion in the context that we are familiar with. And that's why I'm telling you, this is my photography. It's not photoshopped. It's not fake. The only thing I did is enlarge it so that we could see what that little thing was way up high. All right? Let's move on to the next one. There's that disc craft again. That's a good follow-up because what we're seeing here is different types of craft. Are Ruskies making them? I don't know. It could be Ruskies. It could be aliens. It could be Nazis. Nazis. I hate Nazis. But no, seriously, I'm not pretending to know what these things are or who made them. I'm just reporting. I'm reporting something I believe to be extremely important, and it is called the impact of very advanced technology upon the human condition. Love this photograph. All right, that's a chemtrail, that white line. This is a big blow up, and there in the sky is what I call an extra dimensional. And I believe he's at his desk and he is observing what's going on in our atmosphere. I think that, he's like, in some spacecraft or some extra dimensional, cubicle in his office somewhere, and he's at work doing his job, checking up on the planet. Now, maybe it's an artifact of my camera, a lens flare. I don't know. But the curious thing is, if you look, there are other photographs, and I didn't have a chance to include it today, taken by other people. Now this is with a 35 millimeter film, Konica camera. I was using Kodak film. I was using a couple other brands. I think there's Samsung or something, or I can't remember. But I was using very good film. I spent money to get these images. But there's a fella in North Carolina. He and his wife took a picture of the atmosphere over the bay or something like that, and they got that little guy in their photograph when they printed it out in their home computer. This image, very very similar to the image to this, up in the sky. Now I want showed up on their digital photo. Could be, maybe he's lonely. But what I want you to notice though is what the scale would be. Now that would be like, a chemtrail or a contrail, if we're going to go there, which, is going to be some, say, 10, 20 feet. All right, say that image there, that white thing is 20 feet from bottom to top. From side to side, left to right, it goes on for thousands of feet or more, miles, many miles. All right, so that guy's head, if that's his head, if that's what it is that we're looking at, from our perspective here, it's got to be from chin to forehead 20 feet high. What kind of a being is that? He would be a giant if his proportions were similar to that of a human, right? Your head's 1 foot, my head's maybe 1 foot, and that's 1/6 of my proportion. I'm 6 feet tall, so we're talking about something that's 80 feet tall. If he has a body like that, maybe he's got a short little squat body. He's still going to be pretty tall. So this is a curious picture, and that's why I included it, because this image, this guy shows up in another photograph.
Well, why can't you see his body?
Because I think he's like looking through an extra dimensional window into our atmosphere. That's what I think, because in another photograph that I do have, you're going to see him at his desk.
Let's look through. Is it in
And
this folder?
eventually we'll get to it. All right, let's just talk about this one for a minute. Much like that other thing, maybe this is the same type of thing. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 trails. And this is very, very fine definition. It was very high up, and you can actually see the grain. All right, that's how clean a photograph. You're looking at the grain of the print from the scanner. So that's the actual, emulsion on the print that you're looking at there. So that's how much of a blow up that is. And look at the detail we still have. Okay?
Right.
This is not an airplane. Could it? All right. Is it another angle of the following one? Let's go to the next one like you just had. See, now this is another extreme blow up, and it's depixelizing. You can see that it's really, but enough detail is shown here that you can see clearly it is not a helicopter, it is not an airplane, and it's got some kind of tail section that looks like it's distributing stuff. It's got pipes instead of wings. Trick of light? I don't think so. I don't think so. Let's go on to the next one. And here is the same or a similar object actually spraying the chemtrails out there. Again, this was very high up. It was far away. And I managed to capture enough detail. You got to remember, folks, I'm capturing this image with my bare hands in a camera, tracking the speed of the object and snapping the photograph with shutter, with the shutter speed, and not wiggling my hand. That's how steady of a hand you have to have with the further the object away is, the steadier your hand has to be. And here we are again. This is the context picture. It's not spraying here, and that's not an airplane, folks. I don't know what it is. It's another context view. Fabulous photograph. You can really see it's just delivering stuff to the atmosphere. What is it delivering? I don't know. Oh, an airplane with 3 trails and 4 engines. Now I want you to look at that for a second, and Paula, if you would you go backward one? Can you go backward one? This is not an airplane. Let's go to the other one. This is an airplane. Similar height, similar distance.
Oh, but three things on it, huh? See what I mean? 1, 2,
All right?
3 main things.
I'm sorry to torture you people, but I want you to really understand what we're looking at.
Hologram, huh?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one.
I just say that because it's on that airplane.
Yeah.
It doesn't synchronize with the trails.
No.
Whereas on this one,
You can clearly see. Yeah.
it's coming off an unconventional craft.
Absolutely. All right. I love this one. I call this a gravity drive tube sprayer. It was small. It wasn't too far away, but it was far away enough that I had to really blow it up. We're going to be running out of time, so what we're going to do is we're going to skip through these a little faster. I call this a no plane. There's no plane in front of the trail, and it has a little visitor up there, and we don't know what that is either. It seems to have a shadow on it, so I'm beginning to think that must be a pollen or something that got onto my processing thing, but it is kind of cool looking.
Unless we all live in a petri dish.
Unless we all live, yeah, right? So again, no visible airplane, just a dot, and then 3 trails. Moving right along. No airplane at all. There's just a chemtrail being sprayed, and I was tracking this one, and there was no airplane in front of it, and that's why I want to say sometimes they have a cloaking device. They can actually make whatever the object is disappear, and you're just seeing this chemtrail or contrail appear from no apparent source. Moving right along. All right, this is a best of. These are all completely weird, unconventional things. And in the lower right-hand corner, I was maybe 30 feet away. I had to run to the car, get the camera, run back to the backyard, and snap pictures of that red object that to me looked like metal hot dogs tied together. This is a fabulous photograph. Nobody has one like it. Go ahead, you can move right ahead. We can keep going. All right, this is not a comet. It is a craft that fell into the atmosphere and grew a tail and started flying along, and I got a fabulous picture of it. That is not an airplane. I don't know what it is, and it is doing something with the atmosphere.
I get a better vibe from this one.
Yes, well, I have discussion about that. There are apparently, from some channeled information from a medium, a woman who channels spirits. I said, well, I got some questions about my photography, so I took it to this lady, not Marge Turcott, that was somebody else, Lois Hartwick. Superb channel. She is really good at what she does. And I was told that I was capturing imagery of bad guys spraying crap in the sky and good guys spraying other kinds of things to neutralize the stuff they're putting in the sky. That's what I was told. Not scientific, but that's the information that came through. All right, love this photograph. Look at it for a second, appreciate it, and let's keep going. All right, again, tube craft. That's not an airplane. It was over my house in Connecticut. It wasn't very big, but I didn't have the zoom on the camera, so I had to zoom in on it on my scanner, and that's why you see the grain of the photograph. All right, that's the little guy that grew a tail. All right, there's a little spot. It looked like a quarter falling out of the sky, and it took its position underneath the trail of another object. Move right ahead. And there it is. You can see from the lower part of the screen, there's some dust on there or whatever, that black line. But you can see where the object was underneath the trail. You see that little smudge there, that little thing on the lower left? And then in the next instant, within this snap of a photograph, within the shutter speed time, it went from that spot to the next spot. Wow. Okay, and that's that object that then grows a tail. All right? This one?
That one?
Yes, and you'll see what happens. All right, so move right ahead. All right? And there it is. See, it grew a tail. In the lower... below the big one, the big trail, you'll see a slight little trail. Yeah. You see that? It's now growing a trail. That little object went back below and it grew its own tail. Now go to the next image. And I tracked it going through the tail of a tail. Go to the next one. There you go again. Now I got a nice glint of the sunlight or whatever. It became more visible. Go to the next one. So you can see I snapped a roll of film on this sky event. I've just given you a sampling of that sky event that day. Go to the next one. So you can see clearly I tracked these two objects over a period of some minute and a half, just snapping away with a steady hand as it was moving overhead. And that was what was in front of the big trail that the little guy was flying under and then through. That is another event. That was from Falls Village. That was very, very high in the sky. I call that a supercube. This thing would appear, disappear, and then appear in another part in the sky. I just love that one. All right, now here again is another conventional airplane. I don't think so. And this was very, very high. And again, these artifacts of little orbs and white spots, I don't know if that's part of the cloaking device, extra dimensional stuff, but this does not appear to be a normal aircraft. Moving right along. And that's our friend in front of the chemtrail. And now I worked on this one, all right? So this is not a raw photograph. That is our little extra dimensional guy, and I think he's in his little office there. And the details that I saw in this guy, underneath his chin, looks like some kind of apparatus that hooks to his chest or something. But he's at a console, and I did a little bit of work accentuating dark and light, all right, in line, but not to change the image. I didn't change the image in any way, but I did accentuate contrast, light and dark, so that we could pick up a little more detail. That's why it's not a normal color of sky, and you can really see the grain of the print. So this is an extreme blow up. That is the front of a chemtrail, and here's this guy looking at it from, I don't know, from some extra dimensional office somewhere, looking into our reality to check on what's going on. This is my best explanation. But this, again, this particular image, or this type of image, has been found in other people's photography, and I've encountered that on the internet. So and there you go. That's the red tubey-like craft. Again, this image was picked up by MUFON and a couple of other magazines and stuff in Europe, online publications. About 15 feet long, absolutely silent. It just looked like red hot dogs tied together. It was the most bizarre thing I had ever seen. And that was tough to get that one. And I want to go back to this. Again, I want to impress upon you people that this is a living creature that is being attacked. Our sky is full of cirrus clouds. Cirrus clouds are the visible parts of living things, and they're intelligent. And our powers that be, Air Force, whatever you want to call it, are doing something to them to modify our weather and our reality. So that was a pretty fast hour, wasn't it, folks?
Yeah, you want to go longer?
Do you mind?
No, this is good.
All right. So that's a tube craft. We're going to go a little longer. This is Woodstock Access TV. What are we calling ourselves? What's our official name?
Just Woodstock TV.
All right, Woodstock TV.
It doesn't get more Woodstock than this.
I think maybe today it's Woodstock TV with some guy talking bad Russian accent again. I don't know. It's the hat. The hat makes me think Russian. I don't know. The glasses too. This is my UFO glasses.
Right.
This is so I can see in the bright lights of the studio. Right. All right. So again, non-conventional craft. What the heck is that? There's only one streamer coming off of it, and I'm hard-pressed to call that a wing. That is not a wing. There's not even a tail section. It is just a tube floating in the air. All right? This is high technology. High technology that we don't know anything about and what it's doing or who's doing it. Right over our heads. Okay, next one. Again, this one's, I include this because you can see an old chemtrail with a new one being laid out. This particular little guy, this is what I call a context image. So you can see a good swath of the sky. It was definitely chemtrailed a lot that day because it's not blue, it's gray. The sky itself, it's supposed to be clear there. Well, it's full of schmutz. And you can see in the lower left corner an old chemtrail that has spread out already. All right, next one. And we're going to revisit my that's my first image I made with Photoshop to do an artistic rendering. And that's my memory of a craft that visited Rockland County, Pearl River in 1963. And they explained to me that it was a living craft, that it had all the components of animal, plant, and metal machine working together. Yeah, well, we're there. We're doing it. We're hybridizing ourselves with machinery right now, and we're going to be implanted with chips, microchips, RFID, radio frequency ID chips. We're all being barcoded.
You know, can I at this point say something?
Sure.
This was the image that and you're on the green screen going live right now.
Right.
But when I edit it, I'll put that back of you. This was the one that Joe had a lot of problems with. He was really getting into your show, and he said, oh, no, that's just too crazy.
Let me see it.
This is the one.
Oh,
This
that one.
Yeah,
Yes.
he had trouble with it. I'll put it on the editing as we discuss this.
I see. Okay.
But I'm realizing now, because I read the entire Apple computer agreement, license agreement. It always says, please read this first before going any further, before agreeing. And nobody does.
Nobody
right?
does.
They just click because they go, what the heck? There's a monopoly. What can I do after 20, 30 years of being an Apple customer? I'm not going to quit now.
Right.
So as I started reading it, and really reading every single word, because I'm having a lot of problems with hacking, and I spend hours and days with Apple senior advisors, I realized it's really all about something called Apple Pay, which I predict is going to be bigger than PayPal. Even though you think PayPal got out of the box years before, all Apple Computer has to do is get jurisdiction over your IP address. And the reason I say this is because they're talking about a secure thumbprint sign-in, which originally they came out with the PC computers. I saw it on an old laptop. You just whisk your finger by, and they know it's you. But now they've created all this fear, and understandable, about the internet and the fraud, so people are out of the habit or don't even know that you can have a secure thumbprint sign-in.
I've seen the technology in use on a handheld device just the other day.
Right,
to
right.
Get in, this guy, in order to get into his phone.
Yeah, yes.
Into his phone.
So the technology's there, but the problem is we haven't claimed it as men and women. And that's why I'm saying, by being so persistent with Apple, and I told the senior advisor, I'm really sorry, I can't move forward on this correctly. And can you tell me, is this the same agreement that's posted on your website? And he indicated it was, but he said he couldn't be 100% sure. And I said, well, even 99.9% sure, as you know, George, as well as Joe and I do, in court you have to be 100% sure. You have to have every I dotted, every T crossed. So as I got to thinking about this, I realized what you were talking about on this one, about having a being that you saw at a council, where can you show the fingers again? I'll do the close up on you. How are the?
Well, you can actually see one of them in one of the following drawings.
Yeah, and
it's 3 fingers and a thumb.
Right, and it morphed into the council. Can you explain that again? Because then I'll go on with what I learned.
It was just like setting his hands into the. I'll do some drawings sometime so you can get a feel of what I saw. But he would set his hands into this console, much like this table, because it formed fitting to the ship, as everything's circular, and everything's molded and rounded. So in case they bump into something, they don't get cut to pieces. And as the hand set into these depressions that were form-fitting, I could see fiber optic connections, what looked like fiber optic connections, connecting to the tips of his fingers, and really. And then he leaned back, and you could see that as he did this maneuver, he had to make an adjustment to the onboard computer. I mean, his mind and the onboard computer had to communicate, had to hook up, and so that the subtle hand movements did some maneuvering, but the big decisions were telepathic downloading or telepathic communication between the craft and the pilot.
Well, now, see, this is what excites me about Native American culture and deep spiritual wisdom beyond the corporate body, where we create a reflection of the laws of nature in our man-made laws, that can we, instead of viewing this as something frightening or strange, or in Joe's case, just something so off the wall and bizarre, he didn't want to consider it. When you were talking about what if machines came first, and
yes,
we as biological beings came later.
Right.
But still, what does it matter when really we're all on a journey towards the soul, towards understanding what our soul is, in which case, instead of running away from it, where it could be acclaimed in law, you've abandoned it. Why don't we step to the plate, claim our property, and say, I'm the original content creator, or that being that you saw, if he's making a subtle adjustment with his brain or his mind, do you feel pity for him? Do you think he's a slave of some other entity? Or is he just doing his thing? Like we get into an automobile and turn a key, or get into a train. At one time, trains were viewed as dangerous, that people shouldn't be going that fast, and the robber barons and all that.
During that experience, it was explained to me that they were on board with their families. And I had met them. I had met little ones. I had met bigger ones. I had met what appear to be female as well as male. I would not say that they were insectoids, so there's or reptoids. They were humanoid, but they were hairless, as best I could tell.
In this craft?
Yes.
Okay.
And they wore clothes, but the clothes they wore, their spacesuits were a nanometer thick. I mean, they were like so...
alien latex.
Well, no, I was exposed to this fabric as a covering on a book. They showed me a book, which I took to be the repair manual in case things failed. Anyway, this was a very special book, and they showed me this book to give me as evidence of my contact experience. I wanted to keep the book, and they said, no, nix that idea. You can't do that. Yet. So, they said, notice everything about the book. So when I put my finger and ran my finger to feel like the finest silk, it was the most finest fabric you could imagine. And it was just a sort of a solid gray, metallic gray color. But as my finger went down, do you ever see like in a boat going up the Hudson and it leaves a trail, in the water? Yeah. Like that. It left a trail behind my finger, and all these rainbow sparkly colors came emanating off in that sort of liquidy looking trail behind my finger. And I described this to Dr. Semersong, a scientist friend of mine, and he goes, what the hell? We've been trying to invent something like that. It's called crystalline chainmail. It's a nanotechnology. And here I had already seen it and was describing it to him. He goes, where'd you see this stuff? I said, well, yeah, didn't really want to tell you that, but I did anyway. And he took it on board, And this is the fabric that I believe that they were wearing, is crystalline chainmail. So it's incredibly strong, incredibly durable, and it's a metal crystal fabric. And there he is, 3 fingers and a thumb.
Oops, just a second.
And the console that the pilot was at would be where his hand is sort of going flat. That's like everything was molded and round, and light was everywhere inside the craft. I couldn't determine where the light was coming from. And on the other side of him there was the center of the room. I call this the engineering deck. This was the middle deck. Actually, the pilot was in the deck above that. There were 3 decks. There was the control, the bridge, the command and control deck, which is the top of the craft. The middle of the craft was where where this device was, which looked like to me a three-dimensional hologram representation of our universe, or a portion of it. And then below that deck, which I call the cargo bay.
It does look kind of biological plasma-y.
Yeah.
Not hard and metals and,
a lot of molded
screws.
forms. Everything had curve to it. Everything had organic feeling to it. But there was very, very definitely machine consoles, there was computer-looking, displays, and in this clear covered thing, that's where they brought me to. This is the garb of, say, of one of the craft mates. Okay, not the leader. Okay, the leader wore a tunic of some kind, a white tunic, but everybody else had this sort of same gray. They did have a kind of shoes on, form-fitting, very tight-fitting clothing, and they were very delicate looking, as you can see.
Is this the same being that your brother saw but was terrified of? I mean, what was
Yeah.
What
Same
was
kind
the,
of people.
What was the feeling you got? Because when I look at it, maybe it's just your artistic representation with the colors. It has a warm feeling to me.
I didn't want to leave the craft. I said, "Don't put me back down there. I can't." I didn't. Our world is screwed. Take me with you. And they said, "No, we can't take you with us because you die in our world, in our environment." And I asked, I said, "Well, how am I on this ship if that's the case? Because I can't breathe what you breathe, or I can't be in the same." And they said, "Well, we have a way, a technology of creating your environment from Earth, duplicating your environment as an energy field around you." So I was in my Earth environment, air and gravity and what's, life-sustaining for a human being, as an energy field that was about this far around me, all around me. So I could breathe, I could be on their ship, but I didn't have to worry about my safety. That was kind of how that worked.
But your brother was frightened and you weren't.
Well, yeah, he freaked out. He was taken onto the craft right through the wall of the house, and he described it. He said, "I could feel either I was passing through the wall or the wall was passing through me, but I could feel it." And he was about 12, I was about 3, or he was 10, and I was 3, and he was 10, and he freaked out. He just could not accept the experience, and it freaked him out, and they had to put him back into the house. So he was on the craft, and he had to go through those tentacles. And he saw the ship from the side. I saw the craft from below. So he had to come in, and he said going into the craft, through the side wall of the craft, going past those tentacles was terrifying. It freaked him out. It's the only way I can put it. So they put him back in his room, and he ran downstairs and started a fire in the fireplace at the old house, the homestead in Rockland County, and stared at the fire for the next day.
Wow, he knew how to decharge, didn't he?
He was never the same since. I mean, it affected him quite profoundly, and I think a lot of his troubles in life is because he can't take reality seriously after an event like that for him, and neither can I. I mean, I have the authority structures of this planet are so corrupt,
right,
from the advanced information I got from these beings, that
But they were more patient with you because you were.
I didn't know fear is what they said. I didn't know fear yet, and the shape of my mind.
Right.
And boy, did I ever struggle with that for 45 years.
Right.
It's only been the past 12, 13 years I've really understood what the shape of my mind means.
What does it mean, George, to you now?
What it means to me is there's a thing called non-particle physics. There's a thing called sacred geometry. And sacred geometry is best defined as, in nature, you have certain formulae. One is the Fibonacci curve, right? 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. Okay, that's a progression, and in that progression, if you do it as geometry in form, you get this beautiful nautilus shell pattern. That's exactly what a nautilus shell exhibits, is the Fibonacci curve.
It's the
Based on
mathematics of creation.
math is expressed in nature. Nature is expressed in math. This is true. So, in trying to struggle with that statement, the shape of my mind, not knowing fear, that made sense. I was 3 years old. What am I going to be afraid of? I don't know enough to be afraid. Right? But the shape of one's mind is a geometry of the non-physical. Now, what does that mean? Take your emotions. If emoting love, that's going to have a construction as a shape of the non-physical. Well, how can the non-physical have a shape? Well, let's go back to sacred geometry. The master architects of ancient times understood that you can shape attitudes of human beings by the edifice you build. So when you go into a cathedral or you go into an old temple, you're going to be lifted, those spires and those arcs way up high and this big, this gives you a sense of smallness of yourself in compared to the greatness of the edifice, which is a representation of the God,
or
corporation.
awe of creation, if it's trying to imitate, art trying to imitate creation.
Well,
it could
the
be
sacred
that too,
geometry
because
designers, the guys who use those principles are more interested in mind control. They're more interested in shaping your thinking.
Well, take, for example, when I first walked into the public access studios at 537 West 59th in New York City, I had that kind of breathless feeling of awe, like going into a cathedral, or like I remember looking at the Grand Canyon. It surprised me. I saw it before I thought I was going to see it.
Yeah.
And it takes your breath away.
Yes.
And going into a cathedral or some, monumental work of art like that, it duplicates that. Now, when I went into the public access studios, that's just sort of a government building. It's not really that beautiful. There's no soaring cathedral ceilings like there are at the Ulster County Sheriff's, prison that they spent like $50 million over budget for. There weren't huge ceilings, and yet I had this feeling of awe. That's the only way to say it. It's, the idea of being able to communicate with New York City just so deeply impressed me. And then look at what's happened. It became my life.
Yeah.
As time went on. But when you're talking about the shape of your mind, in Eastern philosophy, I guess the holy books of the Hindus, they call mind Buddha, and that mind is the receptacle of the senses. Yet we think of mind as a thought-generating organism, but below thoughts are feelings. So the emotions are extremely powerful. And I noted even when Marshall Rosenberg talks about nonviolent communication, he talks about being in touch with your feelings. And once you know your feelings, then you can access what needs are not getting met. In most cases, they're not getting met. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the uncomfortable feeling of anger, which is an expression that the needs aren't getting met. So that even corporate structures can be pierced if the people in the corporate structures don't use the corporate structures to hide from each other and from their own feelings. Yeah. So I'm really wanting to follow you more and explore with you more what does it mean to you today, the shape of your mind? Because
let me elaborate on that, because the idea follows like this. In non-particle physics, you have things called waveforms, and waveforms exhibit behaviors. Those behaviors are then measured. They measure those behaviors and they can graph it out. So this then begins to put form to the invisible. You see? because you can't see a waveform, and our thoughts are waveforms. They're energies. So in the sense that in nonparticle physics, the geometry of an orbital of an electron around a neutron will give you a shape. All right? But then going further out from that, you will also have a geometry, a shape, to say high frequency directed energy that's coming off of a cell tower. That's going to have a geometry. So the emotional construct that we build, when you, for example, Paula, when you fall in love, do you feel it here in your head? Do you feel it in your heart? Which a lot of people say, oh, I feel it in my heart. Or do you feel it in your gut?
Yeah, right.
See, I feel it in my gut.
Right.
I feel it in my center.
Right.
My
Right.
center isn't where my heart is. My heart is a whole nother animal. It feels, and in space, your heart is a time and space machine. Everybody's heart anticipates a situation well before it happens. And that's documented through history, happens all the time. You'd have to be brain dead people out there if your heart, if you didn't feel something before major events in your life, like a loved one dying or a car accident, the whole 3 o'clock in the morning phone call thing, all of that, when danger is present, you feel different senses. You know, when danger is present, the hair on the back of your head, there's a geometry to fear. Okay? When you fear something, to me, it feels jagged. This is fear. It's like that. When you're at peace with something, you're at rest. So the geometry is going to be collected. It's going to be together. Whereas if you're in anger, you're going to have a lot of sharp edges. You're going to have a lot of...
And shutting down, too, fear. To protect yourself, you know.
Right? Building walls. That's a different kind of fear.
Right.
There's all different ways of describing it, but what I'm saying is there is form to these qualities that we don't see ordinarily. Now, I am saying that these beings who said to me at the time that they're some hundreds of thousands of years in advance of us humans technologically, I believe that they can measure the shape of your mind by what you're putting off in your
Right.
thinking.
Right.
And that they have technology that we are real close to, people. I mean, the things that I'm talking about here, measuring your brain waves. I mean, they're talking about implementing laws for people who have illegal thoughts, thought crime, right?
All my thoughts are copyright violations. That's a song someone, friend of ours, wrote.
This is where we're going.
Right.
This is where we're going. So,
If we see we're going there, and we decide it's not a desirable place to go, why go there? Like you're saying a couple things. One, these new towers that are coming up, the frequencies, that there's this higher technology where people understand that, and we have been miseducated to be fearful of the higher technology instead of learning law that shows us we can be the masters of that technology, but we have to claim it. So I know for myself, when I was sitting in the bathtub doing my parasite cleansing, because I've been about 7 months on this very austere diet, and I wouldn't have stayed on it so long if I wasn't seeing such wonderful results. But at one point I remember in this nice warm bathtub, and I don't know, I guess post-enema, just lying there and just feeling love and feeling forgiveness, that to think that forgiveness is a function of gut hygiene, but we're never told any of this. And you start to try to find this knowledge. It sounds too crass to say doctors are being killed, but it's a fact. Doctors are being killed, so they don't want to talk about it. But instead, I think the real accomplishment would be to understand where this is all going and not to be afraid, that perhaps the doctors didn't talk enough, that they didn't use their community TV, their community radio to express, how could it be illegal in any corporate policy to stretch a hand out and help your fellow man? How could that ever be against any
That's why they shot
real
John
law?
Lennon.
Real law. Yeah.
I mean, he was giving. There are laws on the books, or statutes. Let's not call them laws. I don't know
Right.
what they are.
Policies, corporate policies.
That prohibit a few things. I'm not going to start with the money one first. I'm going to start with religion.
Okay.
All right. I want to start with the religion one first, and I'm going to tell you why. I consider myself no longer Roman Catholic. All right? I walked away from the Roman Catholic thing when I was 17. And then by the time I was 24, I had been immersed in the culture of the Seneca people, the Seneca Nation. And I was adopted Wolf clan. That's my family, is the Wolf. And in trying to understand what we call freedom of religion. Oh, that's a good one, folks. Yeah. Well, it only applies to recognized religions. And the question becomes, who recognizes, who's making these decisions? Either we got freedom of religion or we don't. That's my book. But I found out that I can't practice the peyote teachings of 100 different Indian nations who use peyote and other cactuses, including mushrooms, for spiritual practice.
Sacrament.
As a sacrament. It is so weird, okay, this freedom of religion thing, that the peyote meetings I was invited to, I had to stay outside the meeting tent or the teepee because there was FBI Indians in there making sure white people don't take the peyote. My spirituality went Native American. That's where it went. My evolution went from Roman Catholic to Native American. That was a choice. It was a cultural choice. It was an ethical choice. It was a conscious choice to take up a practice that involved honoring and respecting the air, the water, the fire, the sky, the earth, the moon, and all of the manifestations of creation, seen and unseen. Okay, that is not legal, because knowing who you are in your environment is cosmic law. Knowing your place in the world, knowing your place as a species, knowing your place as an individual, and knowing difference of right and wrong is prohibited knowledge in our freedom of religion, so long as it's a recognized religion. And then they're going to get into outlawing religions because they're radicalized, like Islam. Or ethnicities and such. You know, the whole race card that they play.